Hello, this is Recovery Diaries in Depth. I'm your host, Gabe Nathan. Thanks so much for joining us. We're very happy to have you here. I'm delighted to have as my guest for today Peter Leman. He's a writer and English professor living in Utah, and he's doing wonderful things in his classroom to destigmatize mental health by openly disclosing his own challenges with depression and anxiety. Each week, we'll bring you a Recovery Diaries contributor, folks who have shared their mental health journey with us through essay or video format. We want to see where they are on their mental health journey since initially being published on our website. Our goal is to continue supporting our diverse community by having conversations here on our podcast to follow up and see what has shifted, what has changed, and what new things have emerged. We're so happy to have you along for this journey. We want to remind you to follow our show for new and back episodes at recoverydiaries.org. There, like the podcast, you'll find stories of mental health, empowerment, and change. You can also sign up for our mailing list there so you never miss a new podcast episode, essay, or film. And you can find this podcast pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. We appreciate your comments and feedback about our show. It helps us improve, make changes, and grow. And of course, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Peter Leman, thank you so much for being here. It is a delight to see your face. I know this is just going to be audio only, so other people can't see your face, but I can. And, when I was editing your essay back in 2019, all of our editing work is just done over email. So I really don't have a chance to communicate with people by face and voice. And it's just such a wonderful opportunity to share space with you in this way.
Well, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And it's nice to reconnect after a few years.
So you are a university professor in Utah, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And, that's who you were when you wrote this essay for us. And one of the things that's odd for me about working with writers, and everyone is coming to either mental health advocacy or just sharing their story from a different perspective. For some people, it's their very first time talking publicly. Some people are, quote, like professional mental health advocates, and it's their career, it's their business. I never know what happens to people after we hit publish and we publicize their essay, and, it lives on the website forever. But part of the joy of doing this podcast is reconnecting with people and finding things out about what has transpired in the last few years. And my first question to you is, one of the things I was curious about when I was rereading your essay to prepare for today, just to refamiliarize myself with it, did you receive any pushback from the university or from anyone individually, maybe a colleague, after publishing your essay? Because I suddenly felt this surge of anxiety about that.
Oh.
Good God, did Pete have any negative repercussions? So I just want to know.
None, actually. I mean, that's a really good question, but I've received zero pushback. It's only ever been positive, at least in the sense that people were, expressed gratitude for the essay, for the effect that it had on them. But I never received any pushback whatsoever. I think, I got emails from university administrators. I got emails from our counseling center. I got emails from students, from faculty, from alumni. And it was all positive. So a lot of it was sad, of course, because the response was often, "Thank you for sharing your story. Can I share mine?" And of course, I invite them to, and often those stories are quite sad. But it was overwhelmingly positive.
I'm really glad to hear that, and it's so interesting to me that you used the word "sad" to describe people coming to you with their own stories, because of course it's not the fact of people coming to you with their own stories.
Right.
That's joyful and wonderful.
Absolutely.
But of course, it's the content. And it reminds me a lot of how our site got started. So our site was an outgrowth of a documentary film that was made in 2008 or 2009 about our founder's mental health challenges. And he took this film to film festivals all around the country and even internationally. And at talkbacks, it was constantly people saying, I watched your film, and then wanting to share their own stories. And it's just like...
Well, that's the power of this, right? I mean, that's the power of getting these stories out there, is that it enables other people. It helps them see, oh, maybe this is a step that I can take toward healing, right? Sharing my story with someone who understands, someone who's going to listen. And
And also,
powerful.
I look at it too as a step of... I sometimes use the analogy of an egg, that we all have these little shells around us, right? And it just takes a little tap, tap, tap on that shell for that bird to crawl out and go,
totally.
Me too. Me too. And
exactly.
and we're because we really, I don't know. So I have depression, you have depression, and depression, in spite of what we know about depression, you can name all the statistics of how many people live with it in America, how many people live with it internationally. I still feel isolated. I still feel alone. And I mean, you have that experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, that exact thought has occurred to me, that so many people are being more and more open about this, which is wonderful. And yet, I mean, when the depression kicks in, when an episode comes on, you feel completely alone. And it's hard to remember, or to sort of, to remember that even though other people are out there, or that there are other people out there experiencing this, and you can connect with them, and that you're not alone, but that feeling. I mean, depression is such a strange thing, and I was thinking about the things that we were going to talk about today, and wondering what I would share, what's happened over the last few years. One of the things that I've thought about a lot is the extent to which, depression, in particular, in my experience, has this incredible ability to sort of change your perception of reality in the moment. Where I've had episodes where, and it's whether it's that I feel completely alone, or I feel just so dark and that nothing has meaning, and I'm in that space, and it just feels like it's always going to be like this. It will always be like this. And then when I come out of it, I realize, oh, okay, I'm fine. I'm okay. That's not the case. But in that moment, I mean, it's really striking to me, and I wish I understood better kind of what was happening neurologically. But it feels like I'm, literally seeing the world differently in that space. And and I think that isolation is a huge part of that. Whatever's going on there, that perception of, experience of, sense of loneliness feels so real in that moment, right? And it's really hard to get beyond that.
My sense of it is that depression is almost dysmorphic. It really does alter your perception of self, of environment, of the feelings of your loved ones. Everything gets invalidated or turned on its head, and it feels so fucking real.
Totally.
Anything, you're impervious to anything anybody says, to any form of, like I said earlier, statistics, and this is how many people are suffering from it, and depression, an episode is not forever, and things will change and things will get better. You can negate anything, and it almost feels like you're driving a car, and depression just pushes you out of the driver's seat and says, I'm driving now. And you're just sitting there.
And you can't get control back until, I don't know, until you've waited long enough, or until the right moment comes, the right intervention comes. It just depends.
And that is to me, it's one of the powerful tragedies of suicide, because in a way you rob yourself, or the individual who takes their own life is robbed of the chance to get through that. They've almost been swallowed up by that dysmorphia. And I wonder, if you've had experiences like that you feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't planned on sharing this, but now that you bring it up, this was a couple of years before I wrote this essay. I think I was just really struggling. I don't remember the circumstances. I don't know that matters. But I found myself in one of these episodes where I was just deeply, deeply depressed and struggling and feeling that isolation, feeling that sense of that dysmorphic sense of, not, detached from reality, but as though I were in a different reality, right? And I remember talking to my wife, and one of the things that usually helped was getting out. We live next to a mountain, and I'll go running. I'll go trail running. I'll get the exercise. I'll get the blood pumping, the endorphins pumping. And so I got up on the mountain, and it wasn't helping. Nothing was helping. And I got to this point where I was just feeling just so dark and such a panic that I picked up a rock and started cutting my arm with it. I don't know why. I don't know that I can explain that, or that if it needs explanation, but it was just, I was just sort of in this dark, desperate place and cut myself pretty badly. And then sort of, seeing the blood, started feeling a bit of shock and realizing, I've, this is a problem. And I found this rock to sit on the trail. And I was sitting there for a few minutes, taking some deep breaths, trying to relax, trying to come back to, reality, when out of nowhere, this big, beautiful Swiss Bernese dog came around the corner and just got right up in my face. And this dog just immediately just got its big nose in my face and licked my face as if to say, I love you, I love you, I love you, and then went on its way. And that pulled me out. Like that was kind of a miracle, right? I mean,
Wow.
I didn't expect that. I couldn't have anticipated that. But it was exactly, I don't know, it was what I needed in that moment. And to have just this completely loving animal. It didn't know who I was. It didn't care. It just wanted to lick my face and say hi, right? And then it went about its business, and it helped me kind of reground myself and kind of come out of that, get home and talk to my wife and kind of get the help that I needed to understand what had happened and to not let it happen again. So. I don't know if that dog hadn't shown up, I don't know what would have happened. Like I said, I was in a little bit of a state of shock given what I'd done. But in that moment, I don't know, when you asked, that was the story that came to mind. In that moment, it was just this kind of beautiful canine intervention.
Natural born therapy dog.
Yeah. I found out later her name was Nebo. She lived down the street from us, and she actually got lost in our yard once. And so I got to kind of save her and take her home once as well. So
it's reciprocal life saving.
Yeah, I think so.
And I wonder, if that wasn't life licking your face saying, I love you, I love you, I love you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that. And when we think about people who don't, or who end up in that place, it's just heartbreaking. And when there are cases when there isn't someone or something there to kind of help those people. Given what I do, given the fact that my own children have mental health struggles as well, and so many of my students, that moment, right? That knowing what that place is like, and knowing how powerful it was for me to have something show up and kind of pull me out of it. I worry about people who get to that place and maybe don't have something to pull them out of it, right? Maybe don't have that. And I think that's part of what motivates me to try to, help students and others kind of prepare to sort of be, prepared to, deal with those kinds of situations, to put themselves, I didn't consciously put myself in a situation where, an animal was going to help me, but I can imagine others putting themselves in a situation where, they couldn't get a friend or a family member or somebody, who can respond when they need it. Another experience, and I have a family member. I'll just be quick with this, but a family member who, and this was even longer ago, but who was suicidal and was in a really, really panicked, desperate state. And I was in a different state, and his somebody told him, his ex-girlfriend, this was part of what precipitated it, but she convinced him to call me, and I got him on the phone and just tried to keep him on the phone and just tried to keep him talking and keep him talking, and got another phone and had my wife call family members and friends, and I kept him talking until I got him home, and waiting there were family members ready to help him and sort of catch him. And that was really hard because I wasn't there. I wasn't there. But one of the things that he said later was how much it meant to him to realize how quickly people were ready to be there to catch him. How quickly we responded, and it wasn't just me. It was my parents. It was my other siblings. Like we were there. I'm really grateful for my family. We're not perfect, but we have each other's backs in a crisis, and it scares me that there are people who don't have that, right? Who don't have that kind of, and so that's, I don't know, one of the things that I hope I can be, for a student who maybe doesn't have that. And that's one of the difficult things when students, are at university, they're far from home, they, maybe don't know who they can turn to if they get to that place. And so I hope that I can, and I and other professors and others, as we kind of continue working on this issue and continue, promoting conversations and talking about it and encouraging awareness that kind of functionally as a university, we can sort of be that safety net, right? We can sort of be there for those students because too often they don't have that support when they most need it. So,
well, I have a lot to say about what you just said, but one of the things that really stands out to me is this idea of being a safe person. And I think that there are people who, and this isn't a put down to anyone, but like, if I
of course,
put a certain insignia on my social media profile, or I wear a certain pin, or I do this, I do that, then I'm showing that I'm a safe person. You're showing it on day one in your classroom. I think your students know that immediately about you. And we'll get to your essay a little later where you write about how you do that and why. And, you are that big dog in the woods for your students. I think it's very obvious and very clear and very powerful. And I think they have a lot to be thankful for setting foot in your classroom. The other thing I wanted to say, well, it's the truth, is your story about your family member and everybody kind of rallying around them demonstrates something that I think a lot of people don't know, but really need to. And it's that anyone can prevent suicide. I think there are people who believe, well, that's the realm of crisis counselors or mobile crisis or psychiatric emergency response units, or it's only the call takers at 988. And it is not true. We, you, me, the sound engineer on the other end here, my neighbors across the street, my wife downstairs, we are the front lines of suicide prevention in our own little communities of the people who we know, the people with whom we work, our families and our friends. We are the ones listening. We hear things, we see things, we notice things. And if we are educated and we know what to listen for, what to look for, what to observe, behavioral changes, things of that nature, we can intervene and we can prevent suicide. And I want people to feel empowered in that way and to have that knowledge that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, as you're talking about that, literally Friday night, Saturday night, my daughter got a text from a friend that was unusual. It set off red flags for her, and she said, "I think we need to go visit this friend." And we asked, okay, what was going on? And she was saying how grateful she was for all of her friends. It was this text thread, and how she loves them all and appreciates them all. And she said, she doesn't talk like this. This doesn't sound like her.
Yeah, it sounds like a goodbye.
Something was wrong. Yeah, it was a goodbye. And so we said, all right, load up. So we got in the car, picked up some other people and went to her house, made sure her parents kind of were aware of what was going on. And my daughter went in and talked to her, and she was writing notes. She was writing goodbye letters. I mean, she was,
wow.
It was kind of a serious situation. It breaks my heart that my daughter, who is 16, and this has happened before with another friend, and she was even younger then, that this is something that she's, I don't know, as a kid, is having to deal with. But at the same time, I'm so grateful for her. She is incredibly sensitive, and she recognizes this, she recognizes that, yeah, each one of us, it doesn't matter if you're 16 or if you're 46 or whatever, right? That whether you're a therapist or not, that if you know the signs, if you know what to look for, you can intervene and you can save somebody's life.
Yeah. And it's incredible. It's incredibly sad that she had to be in that situation, but it's incredibly powerful that alarm bell went off and knew what to do and did it.
Well, and it's partly because, and this isn't, I mean, it's just what you said before, that, when you're educated, right? And we've done, my wife and I have done a lot to be open with our children about mental health, to be open with them about suicidality and suicidal ideation and signs to look for because of my experience. I mean, they check in with me, I check in with them, but it's also made them very sensitive to the people around them. And they've been there for friends in really difficult times. And I'm grateful that they've embraced that, as difficult as it is. I think it's necessary that we, as many people as possible can, have those tools and have that ability to recognize the signs and step in when they can. So,
yeah, we're the safety net, and to your point of it sucks that she's 16 and has to do this. I mean, my children are 12. It sucks that they have to do active shooter school drills.
Yeah.
I mean,
totally.
It's so, but we can kick and scream about the world that we live in, or we can work to change it, and we can work to make the best life that we can with what we have. And I getting back to reaching out, I think there are also people who fear, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I, ask someone if they're suicidal and I'm wrong? And I had this experience with my own father 2 months ago. He sent me this text message where he's like, I just want you to know I'm so proud of you and I'm sorry for things that I did, when you were a child, and I have so much regret and I'm just asking for your forgiveness. And I was like, whoa, red flag city here.
Yeah.
This guy, what? This was totally out of nowhere. And I met up with him and I looked in my father's eyes and I said, are you thinking of killing yourself? And he was like, what? And I said, well, there's this that I've noticed about you, this that I've noticed, this about you that I've noticed. You're also an older male. You're a suicide loss survivor yourself. Your sister killed herself. So that ups your risk, I was going through all these points.
Yeah.
And you're sending me this random fucking message of I'm sorry and please forgive me. And so it sounds like someone who's tying up loose ends and is preparing to say, see you later. And he had to reassure me he had other reasons for coming to me with that. And that, I'm totally healthy physically and mentally, and that's not blah, blah, blah. But he was also very moved that I cared enough to ask him.
Yeah.
And the answer to what if I'm wrong is, who gives a shit if you're wrong?
Yeah.
The question is not that. It's what happens if I do nothing? And it is that.
Yeah.
And
well, I love
that.
I love how direct you were with him too. Cause that's, I think, we're worried. We kind of walk on eggshells, we're sort of, obviously if someone is in crisis, it's a sensitive issue, but that directness matters. And in that case, yeah, what if you were wrong? Then they know you care about them, right? Then you're worried about them and you're thinking about them. And yeah, that's great. But if there is an issue and you decided, I don't want to touch on this, then it opens up leaves the door open for tragedy, right? And that directness, I mean, in my experience, that's really important. It's so much better and more important to be direct with people, to be blunt, than to sort of tiptoe around it. And I've directly asked questions like that to people before.
Use the language, use the direct question, and you will get a direct, truthful answer.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes then, if the answer is yes, what do you do with that information? And that's a whole other set of education. And
of course,
your options are varies by geography and resources and all of that, but there's always next steps. And I would love to know, before we get into your essay, you wrote this essay pre-COVID, and we've, gone through this pandemic, and I'm curious to hear from you as a professor, what changed from then to now in terms of your own mental health, the mental health of your students. How did that impact things?
Yeah. Oh boy, this, answer to this could be an entire podcast episode itself. It's been a rough, what's it been, 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years since then. I'll talk personally, and I'll talk about the students, but in the middle of COVID, my wife got a cancer diagnosis. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was stage 2, a little beyond stage 2. So it was, but we found out she had one of the genes, the PALB2 cancer gene. And so she ended up getting a full double mastectomy, radiation therapy, chemotherapy. And in the middle of that, her dad passed away. And it was it was difficult. It was really hard. And in the middle of COVID, so we were sort of limited, when she had her cancer appointments, I couldn't visit her all the time, or other people couldn't be there to support her. And it was definitely challenging. And then to have her dad pass away in the middle of that, and my kids, my son especially, he was really close to him. And so that was hard. My kids are both really social. They love their friends, and COVID took a toll. Being isolated, not being in the classroom, not being with their friends was extremely difficult. And I think not just them, but students their age, who lived through that, I think we're still seeing the effects of that. And I think we won't really fully understand the impact of that for years to come. I'm personally kind of a, sort of an introvert, and I didn't mind, not having to be around lots of people all the time, and, spending more time in nature and stuff. But of course, we were dealing with cancer in the middle of that. So that was challenging. We got through it, and I think as a family, we grew closer, and we know how to survive together. But my students, the sort of rates of, so at BYU, and I assume it's similar to other universities, if a student has a disability of some kind, they can get an accommodation letter, and there's an office, and I already received a lot of those before COVID, but there were even more, I think, after, and I think it was hard. Students didn't like. I think it was hard for them to take classes all online. I think a lot of students really missed the in-person interaction, but then when they came back to in-person interaction, there was still anxiety about the disease, and there was anxiety about, being around people, and it took some adjusting. Those first few classes back after the pandemic were really difficult. And for a couple of years, and I don't know that the rates have changed, I don't have the data on it, but certainly there were kind of increasing numbers of students with mental health challenges, with depression, anxiety, who would get accommodation letters, or who, didn't know they could get an accommodation letter, but would come and talk to me, or would have a breakdown or something like that. And it was tough. It was a difficult period. I think it was difficult for everywhere, but in terms of this specific issue, I certainly saw an increase in people who struggled. And but I think that also for me, and I think for other faculty that I know and other professors, that it made us kind of hyper vigilant as well about looking for signs, about reaching out to students, following up with students outside the classroom. One of my colleagues who is also a big advocate for these kinds of things. We talk about how we essentially have 3 full-time jobs as a teacher, but also you're expected to publish and research where I work, and then you're also expected to do a lot of administrative work. And I've got extra administrative work right now, so it's. But then on top of that, we're also the front line in helping students who are struggling with mental health, and that. Especially if you're committed to it, especially if you are making a concerted effort to be aware of and reach out to those students, that's another full-time job. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I there's still challenges, and there's still a lot of students who come forward, a lot of students who need help. So I don't know if it's gone down at all. I think it might be a little bit difficult to tell because I'm so open about it in my classes. So a lot of people, come to me and talk to me and are open. So I don't know exactly what all the other professors' experiences are. But anyway, yeah, short version, COVID was hard. I'm glad we're past it, but we're still dealing with the effects.
But my only follow-up question to that before we get into your essay is, so as an individual whose, wife had her life threatened by cancer during a pandemic, and an individual who lives with depression himself, an individual who has 3 full-time jobs at the moment.
That's overstating, I suppose, but.
Well, it's probably understating it, actually, if we're really honest about it. Who helps you and who helps your colleagues? Because I'm hearing a lot about the students and, you and other like-minded faculty, but I suspect that, burnout and exhaustion and feelings of overwhelm, and also probably feelings of despair, I can't do enough for these students. I feel like I'm failing them, all of those thoughts. So who's helping you guys?
Thank you for asking that, first of all. That's incredibly thoughtful, and it reminded me of the first time a student asked me that. And this was after COVID. We'd returned to classes. This might have been in 2022, and it was a class where I don't know. It was a really positive experience, that class, and there were several students in that class that had mental health issues, and we had lots of conversations in class and outside of class, and one of those students at one point saw me outside of class and said, "How are you? Are you doing okay? Can I check in with you?" And I started to cry because I was like, nobody ever asks me that, Like it's making me cry right now just thinking about her. I really appreciated it because I don't know. I mean, I ask for help when I need it, when I feel like I really need it. But I, with my wife's cancer, she was the priority. 100% she was the priority. And I wasn't the one who needed taking care of. I mean, I guess that was kind of how I thought of it at the time, that she was the one who needed taking care of. And so I didn't, whatever I was dealing with, whatever I was struggling with, I didn't talk about it because she needed the help and needed the support. We actually had a conversation about this a couple of days ago, or a week or so ago. We were kind of reliving some of that and thinking about some of those experiences. And she said, I realized that we never really talked about the fact that was probably really hard for you too. And I said, yeah, but I don't know. Thank you for acknowledging that, but I don't know what to say to that, because I was like, but you were the priority, right? Your life was in danger, and that's. Yeah. But it was hard. It was, and but I kind of, and so, yeah. And as to your question, I think a lot of faculty, we look out for each other, we take care of each other. I've got some really close friends, and here on campus that I we check in with each other, we support each other, we each other's lifelines in a lot of ways. But I think that is something that can be overlooked. And I think burnout is a real thing. Emotional exhaustion is a real thing. One of these colleagues last year, I believe, really kind of reached the end of his rope. There were just so many students, and he was taking so much on, and he was there for everybody, but it was just overwhelming. And you know, he was working miracles with those students, but he needed somebody there for him too. And fortunately, his family was supportive, and I was there to try to help him as much as possible. But yeah, he needed to kind of step back and realize that he needed to care for himself as well. So, yeah. I mean, sometimes I think we're there for each other, and sometimes I think some of us just kind of work in isolation, hoping for the best. But that's certainly something that could change. Yeah, but thank you for asking that. That's really thoughtful.
You're very welcome. And it is hard to be a caretaker, whether it's a partner with cancer or it's vulnerable students. It seems like one of the easiest things to do is to forget yourself and pick up the phone and take the call, whether you're emotionally ready for it or not, or answer the email, even if you have capacity for it or not. And it's like, well, I just have to do this. And what I've had to learn in that caretaker role and as a suicide awareness advocate is it doesn't always have to be me. And it can't always be me. Sometimes I can do a warm handoff to someone else. I can say, I do not have capacity for this right now. It doesn't mean that I don't love you and that I don't care. But I can't be the help that you need right now because of shit that is happening with me. Here's
absolutely.
Someone else. And it just, we want to take on everything and everyone, but it's not possible. But I want to talk about kind of what is possible. And I mean, I think that leads really neatly into your essay because it's a very small thing that you do in your classroom, but it's also enormous. And I think it's a wonderful example to other people for how I'm always talking about how can we move the needle in terms of conversations around mental health, conversations around suicide and its prevention. And there are lots of ways to move the needle, just a little bit. And I think one of the most powerful ways to do that is through disclosure and creating an environment of listening and seeing.
Yes.
And I feel like that's what you do in your classroom. So I would like you very much to please read your essay. At this point, it's called Why I Tell My University Students I'm Depressed.
January 7th, 2019, 9:30 a.m. I've just kicked off day one of a writing class for English majors with a review of standard academic policies. It's dull but necessary, stuff I've gone over 100 times with previous classes, but when I come to the last policy, I'm suddenly nervous. I've taught for over a decade, everything from freshman survey courses to graduate seminars and given presentations around the world. I don't get nervous. I try to keep my voice steady as I read the university's single-paragraph mental health policy. I emphasize its importance and then tell my students for the first time in my career that I live with severe depression and anxiety and have for as long as I can remember. About a month before this, a student took her own life on campus. She survived the initial attempt, but died a day later in the hospital. It was devastating, deeply, viscerally devastating. This wasn't the first suicide on campus, certainly. Utah as a whole has an alarmingly high suicide rate, and suicide is the second leading cause of death for college-age students. But it was the first I knew of since I began working there in 2011. It happened in a building with heavy foot traffic and windows for walls. People saw. It was all we could talk about or think about for weeks. Some of us never stopped thinking about it. I didn't know the student personally, but there was no relief in knowing or not knowing. She was one of ours, or at least she was supposed to be. We failed her as a campus community. Part of me demanded to know why and how, but another part of me already knew. For one thing, we weren't having the right conversation, or really any conversation at all. Every year I see more and more students fall behind. I see more and more students ask for extended deadlines and fail to meet them. I see more and more simply stop coming to class. On the one hand, I feel it is important to challenge students. College should be hard. It should push young students to their limits. On the other, what good is any of it if students are pushed too far? I'm deeply troubled by my complicity in this crisis and its concomitant culture of silence, particularly because I understand on an experiential level what many students are going through. I understand that we can't just expect them to deal with it. I can't do anything for the student who took her life. We failed her, and I grieve that fact. But for others like her, it isn't too late. Fortunately, many universities, including my own, have committed increased resources to counseling and other services, but not every student feels empowered to reach out for help. Stigmas still linger, shame holds people back, silence persists. So, on January 7th, 2019, I tried to break one small corner of that silence. As a child growing up in rural Idaho, I was considered moody. I don't think we had any other language for it. I was often told to cheer up and get over it. I had spells of sadness and anger that would seem to come out of nowhere. I remember being 7 or 8 and crying as I sat next to my mother, who cried for me. She was young and frightened and did what she could, but neither of us really understood what was happening. I fought my moodiness through high school and college, but it wasn't until I was 26 years old that someone finally wondered out loud if I had clinical depression. I reluctantly met with a therapist, and she confirmed the diagnosis. It helped to know, I suppose, but it was also difficult to accept at first. I was ashamed. After a few therapy sessions, I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't fully understand that this wasn't something that would go away. I began graduate school and enjoyed periods of relative stability, but then for reasons I didn't understand, I would go into stretches of deep depression, sometimes for days or weeks. My rural upbringing taught me the value of hard work, so I consistently dragged myself to class, but I was often miserable. I interpreted these feelings as evidence that I was stupid, that I didn't belong in graduate school, and that I was a worthless person. I met with a doctor and started medication. The effect was positive, though I knew it wasn't a cure. I graduated and started work as a professor. On some level, I think I kept waiting for that moment when I'd finally be happy. I was married to an amazing woman. We had 2 beautiful children. I had a great job. People reminded me of these facts when I bottomed out. You have every reason to be happy, they'd say. Guilt and shame only compounded my feelings of worthlessness and depression. I still kept my nose to the grindstone, and in fact, getting lost in work sometimes helped distract me from what was going on inside. But I still believed I wasn't and never would be good enough. I wondered sometimes if my family would be better off if I were dead. I started meeting with a new therapist. His approach was different. We dove into the science. We talked about brain chemistry and body chemistry, and I finally started to understand what was going on inside. I started to develop strategies for identifying periods of depression before they began and for coping with those periods when they happened. I'm not always good at this. I've never canceled class because of depression, but on days I don't teach, I often can't get out of bed. I can't bring myself to do the things I know will help, like exercise and meeting up with friends. I've made excuses to my students for why I wasn't able to grade their assignments as quickly as I should have. Some days I make it to work, but I close my office door, keep the lights off, and simply stare at the wall. Despite, or perhaps because of these experiences, I have grown in my understanding of and sympathy for those who struggle with mental illness. I know what it's like to hate yourself and believe you're not up to the challenge. I know what it's like to wake up sad and feel like the sadness is everywhere and will never go away. I know what it's like to feel that inexplicable pain inside and that terrifying longing to make it go away, whatever it takes. But I also know that the only way I got through these moments was because I opened up to people I loved and trusted and learned how to keep going, whatever it takes. When I finished telling a shorter and much less polished version of this story on that first day in 2019, a young woman in the back had tears in her eyes. I worried I had said the wrong thing or took it too far. Other students looked at me intently, some looked away. I wasn't sure the speech did what I'd hoped, and I obsessed about it the rest of the day, but I believed it was the right thing, ultimately. So I shared it again in my other class, and again the next semester, and every semester since. Despite the limited effect one person can have in culture change, students started to respond. Many have met with me to say what it meant to them to hear a professor talk about his mental health. This has been rewarding but heavy. I'm even more aware of how many students carry tragedy, immediate and potential, within them each day. But the goal, at least to begin with, was not to reduce that number. The goal was to help create a circle of light that students could look to and hopefully be willing to step within, a space cleared of shame and loneliness where understanding, compassion, and love could thrive. I've heard powerful and heartbreaking stories from students in the last year and a half, but one in particular stands out. She was in that first class, maybe the one with tears in her eyes, I can't remember for sure. But I do remember that she approached me after that day and, with difficulty, started to share her own experiences with mental illness. She was and still is a brilliant writer and thinker and often asked for feedback on her work, so we met frequently. I didn't try to counsel her, of course, but I did what I could as her professor and fellow traveler on the difficult road of mental health recovery. Not long after the class ended, she sent me a letter, which I keep close by to this day, in which she gave me permission to share. It reads in part, "At the beginning of the semester, you spoke to us about some of your mental health challenges. This helped me trust you as a teacher and accept some of my own difficulties, as well as have hope for my future. Since April, I have received needed treatment, and I now feel better than I thought possible. Please know how grateful I am for your help and example. Having a professor who empathized with what I was experiencing meant the world." Part of me would still rather keep my story to myself. If asked why, I would say I value my privacy, but if I'm being honest, I'm still insecure about sharing it. But what I've learned from this student and her classmates is too important not to share. And what I've learned is precisely that. We must share. Stigma and shame and the fear of being perceived as incapable of keeping up have made mental health conversations at universities particularly difficult, but it is a problem everywhere. Fortunately, things are improving and will continue to improve as long as we keep talking. The more we talk, the bigger that circle of light gets, the more people it encompasses. The more we talk, the more likely the edge of that circle will, at the right moment, reach someone who desperately needs it.
Peter, I love this essay. I love what you do with your platform, and your platform is your classroom. It is your space to use as you see fit, and you are responsible for how you lead. And I think that this essay is so demonstrative of the fact that you lead with love and compassion and understanding, and it's a pretty extraordinary thing.
Thank you. Thank you. I truly appreciate that. I'm just, trying to do the best I can, I think. But I'm so grateful to you for your platform as well, and the fact that you let me kind of essentially collaborate with you in getting this message out and be part of the wonderful project that you're doing that reaches so many people as well. So, yeah.
It was a pleasure the first time, an even greater pleasure this time. And before you go, I want to point out something that's really, really important that you talk about in your essay. You mentioned how in times when you've been bottoming out, there have been people who have pointed out to you all the wonderful things in your life, your wife, your two children, your stable job.
Yeah.
And actually, I recorded another interview earlier today where I had a similar conversation with that guest too, about how in the suicide prevention community, it's like one of the biggest don'ts. When you're talking to someone and they're telling you they're not doing well and they're telling you they're depressed or even they're telling you they're suicidal, don't go to them and say, yeah, but you've got a wife and you've got two great kids and you've got a job. We all know what that, you don't need to tell someone that they have all of these things because A, they know it anyway. And B, guilting someone about feeling depressed or trying to guilt someone into staying alive. All it does is it just puts shame on top of whatever they're feeling already.
It does.
And it's pretty, I understand where the motivation to say those things come from, but if you really pull back the camera and look at it, it's a pretty unhelpful thing to do. And I'm just grateful that you pointed that out in your essay.
Yeah. And that was, there was some specific experiences that came from. And I agree. I think I mean, in the case of some people who've said those things to me, at the time, of course, I wasn't grateful for what they said, and I, not that I'm grateful now, but I've tried to wonder, why did they say that? And I think often, especially if it's someone who doesn't understand, or I think they're scared. I think sometimes those
for
people are
sure.
scared, and they're speaking from fear rather than compassion or understanding, right? And maybe in their mind, that's the thing to say, positivity. Let me just throw positivity at you. Look at all the good things, right, in your life and worth
And
living
let me
for.
stop
But
this as fast as I can,
yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm scared
exactly.
of what this person's telling me, and I kind of want to put a cork in the bottle.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we don't have to do that. And we can't do it anyway. And
yeah,
the thing is to be, just be
yeah,
with that person.
yeah,
Be
yeah,
with them
absolutely.
in their time of need, their time of struggle. You don't have to fix it. You can't fix it, but you can just be with them.
Yeah. Do we have time that I could share a quick experience
Please, yes.
along those lines? Yeah. This was another thing that happened during, since I published this essay, and, after I kind of got back from COVID, I was walking across campus, beautiful day, and then I heard this high-pitched noise, and it sounded like, I wondered if there was a band or something that was playing, or there's some kind of singing going on. But as I got closer, I realized someone was screaming at the top of her lungs, kind of terrifying screams. And I started running toward it, and other people were running toward it. And I got up next to this building, and there was a student huddled down on the ground, curled up, just screaming repeatedly at the top of her lungs, right? She could hardly even breathe. No idea what was going on. Nobody else was around. And people were trying to get her to talk, but she's not responding because she's in a full panic attack. And I mean, I didn't know what to do exactly, but I sat down next to her and I said, "Hey, I'm going to put my hand on your shoulder. I hope that's okay. Try to breathe with me." And then I said, and I just tried to say, "Let's slow down your breathing. Can you feel that?" And I tried to tap her shoulder in rhythm, and let's slow your breathing down and slow your breathing down. And slowly the screams stopped, and she was kind of hiccuping, and but she managed to start taking deep breaths and taking deep breaths and taking deep breaths, and she eventually kind of pulled out of it, and then we just sat there. And I didn't try to interrogate her or anything. We just sat there and just kind of breathed together, and she started talking, and she said, "I don't know what happened." She was a brand new student, freshman. And had walked through this loud building and all kinds of new students, and she just had a full panic attack. And she'd never had one before, and she was just absolutely terrified. But in that moment, she just needed somebody to sit with her, right? And to breathe with her until she got through it. And I'm grateful that I was there to help her. Other people were there. I'm grateful that helped. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, okay, let's just try to breathe, right? But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, but I don't know, that it's hard to do. It was so uncomfortable. I mean, it was so unexpected, out of the ordinary, and there, like I said, there were other people there, and nobody knew, should we call an ambulance? Should we call the ER? What's going on? And fortunately, nobody tried, yelling at her or anything like that, which of course wouldn't have helped. Or telling her, be grateful that you're at BYU, or be grateful that that you're here.
Or slapping her, throw water on her.
Yeah, snap out of it. Yeah,
all those things we see in the movies. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And she just needed somebody to be with her for a minute. And I think that same thing. It's uncomfortable. Silence is uncomfortable. When someone is sad, when someone is depressed, when they're in a panic attack, it is uncomfortable. But we have to be willing to sit with that discomfort and be there for someone else, and not try to fill that discomfort or assuage that discomfort by, projecting our insecurities and saying, you should be grateful for this, you should be grateful for that, right? Like, be okay with that discomfort, because sitting in that space with that person when they're in that position is what they need more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a huge part of suicide prevention is not telling people you are not alone, which I see so much on bumper stickers and on social media. It's showing people
Yeah.
you are not alone.
They need to feel that. They need to feel that.
And that's what you do on the first day of class. And that's what you did with that young woman on campus. And I think we can all do that with each other in various ways. We can find those ways to do that for people.
Yeah, absolutely. She's doing great now, by the way. She made the dean's list in 2022, graduating in next semester in civil engineering. She's a rock star. So,
and she may never have thought any of it was possible there on the ground, but
yeah, for sure.
She made it. And I'm so grateful to you for who you are and what you do and how you are. And thank you for being here and spending some time with me.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's these things are hard to talk about, but it's so important, and I'm so grateful that you are giving me the opportunity to be part of this.
What a joy to talk to a person who exemplifies the meaning of educator. Peter Leman is a writer and English professor living in Utah and an extraordinary human being doing such wonderful things in his life and in his classroom to help students feel not alone. Thank you for being on the show, Peter. Before we leave you, we want to remind you to check out our website, recoverydiaries.org. There, like this podcast, you'll find additional stories, videos, and content about mental health, empowerment, and change. We look forward to continuing to grow our community. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to join our mailing list so you never miss a podcast episode, essay, or film. I'm Gabe Nathan. Until next time, take good care.